Welcome to My Stable Relationship, an equestrian performance podcast where we will deep dive into the mindset and management challenges of ourselves and of our peers. Our discussions will allow you to learn from experts, encourage you to set audacious goals, overcome challenges, and develop actionable plans. Ready? Let's do this. Hello everyone, Lauren here, and thank you so much for tuning into this episode of My Stable Relationship. Before we get going today, I want to let you know that I have a really exciting announcement about a giveaway that I will be sharing with you at the end of this podcast episode. So, in particular, if you are interested in this mindset and management work and interested in performance coaching, stick around until the end. I am super excited to tell you all about it. I have been well, just dealing with the highs and lows of horse ownership this week that we've been starting to discuss a bit on this podcast. I am always my number one client for the performance coaching work that I do. About 5 weeks ago, my favourite horse Rio injured his hoof quite badly. We had a period of really wet weather and the paddocks were either soaking wet in the grass or muddy. This meant that all of the horses' hooves were also absolutely soaking wet and a bit soft. And it looks like what happened was Rio leant over a fence to get to some of the longer grass and he clipped his coronet band with the wire as he did so. But then the wire got caught or cut open his coronet band. And as always happens whenever anyone panics about anything, the situation immediately escalated and worsened. So the wire cut him at his coronet band, he panicked, and he instinctively pulled his leg backwards towards his body. So at this point, you can imagine that the wire had no way out except downwards and through his hoof. He basically gouged his whole hoof wall out through the laminae and into the internal structures. But so interestingly, he didn't catch his shoe. The shoe was still on his hoof. Now, if this is as confusing to you as it was to me, I put some photos up on Facebook at Journey of Equine, so go and check it out and let me know if you've ever seen anything like that before. It's pretty amazing, but also pretty stressful. Don't look if you don't like blood. I tried to pick the cleanest photos, but still, consider this your warning. So when I went to catch the horses in the paddock, Rio's hoof was bleeding everywhere. And this is one of those injuries that I just couldn't quite see how bad it was because of the blood. So I walked him to the stables and I called the vet. And as a quick side note, I have the best team of vets that work on my horses. Some of them I chose for their specialities that they might have. And then my normal vet team I have known since I was like 12 years old, and we have a really fabulous relationship. So I asked the vet if he should come and look at it that night, and he said to me that he'd basically just be wrapping it to see if we could stop the bleeding as a first step. So we decided that I would just do that myself. I gave Rio some pain relief, and really he seemed fine. He wanted to eat and he was still walking, and at that point I felt okay and I felt fairly positive about it. But it was the next morning that I started to become more anxious from the point that I unwrapped his leg. So I'd managed to stop the bleeding. That was good news. But as I had stopped the bleeding, I was able to really see how deep and how bad it looked. And it gave me this really sinking feeling and a sick feeling to my stomach. But I'm really skilled at making a plan and taking next steps. So I told myself that I'd take some photos, drive myself down to the vet surgery, and then I'd just see if they'd take a look at the photos and at least give me a tetanus injection for him, given that he had actually caused it with wire. My next sinking feeling and increase in anxiety happened as the vet looked at the photos I had taken. Instead of saying anything to me, they walked into the back room, like the office room where all the other vets are, and they all closed the door. And my primitive brain was not okay with this. The part of my brain that jumps into conclusions immediately thought, I knew this was bad. And they left me hanging for quite some time. And in that time, I was feeling anxious. I wasn't wanting to stand still. And for sure, my body temperature had increased. And I was just pacing back and forth across the reception area. But for what I felt was no real reason afterwards. Because after they opened the door again, they gave me the tetanus injection that I wanted. And they just sent me away with instructions to photograph it each week so we can track how it heals. No worries. Anxiety for nothing. But my real anxiety kicked in about an hour after I'd arrived home when the vet called me and they had had a change of heart. So they said they actually did want to come see him after all and that they were more concerned about the injury the more and more they thought about it. Now, as I tell this story back to you, I bet you're thinking, oh, what great news. Best the vet comes and sees Rio and just has a look, gives him some more pain relief and maybe some antibiotics. And I agree, but my primitive brain was doing something else completely. It was spiraling. And want to know what that looked like for me? So for me, it was a series of thoughts, all of them getting increasingly worse and worse and causing me more and more anxiety and panic. So it started out as a thought about, never in my life has my vet called to come and see one of my animals. And then I jumped to, well, this must be so bad. Rio is for sure going to be put to sleep, and this is it. I better go up to the stables and say goodbye to him. And then the next worries were like, where am I going to bury him? How am I going to transport his body? Who am I going to ride? Who am I going to do my structuring examinations on? And it just goes on and on. And in the time between the vet calling me and my vet arriving, my brain had gone down such a spiral, and I had Googled everything from horseshoes to brace missing hoof walls, right through to horse cremation and burial services, through to even starting to look at new horses to buy in case I needed another suitable one for my current instructor program. Never mind that I have 4 other horses besides Rio. Never mind that I'm on a property where I could potentially bury him. My brain was on a mission to go a million miles an hour. And I really hope that resonates with you. And I just want to show you that it does happen to all of us, even those of us who have qualifications in this work. You would think that I could immediately manage my mind in these situations, but no brain is perfect. And my goal is always just to, number 1, recognize it. Just be aware that it's happening. And number 2, if I can, redirect it rather than stop. It is nearly impossible to stop at that point without us doing some extensive work and really setting up some serious strategies for you. And even then, I have those strategies and I still just had to redirect. And just so you actually find out what happened to Rio here, he is still alive. He is in my stables. He is still injured, but he is sound and able to be in the paddock with his friends as long as he has a bandage on full time. We're not exactly sure how the hoof will grow out, but we will give him every chance possible. So all of that extra worrying and anxiety before the fact wasn't so necessary after all. It was just a lot of extra energy expended on my behalf. And with that update on me, let's get into the topic today. Over the next few episodes, I really want to share about each of my core beliefs in my coaching business and how they're relevant as principles that apply to you in your daily lives. The episodes over the next few weeks will be things like don't trust the process, trust yourself, data over drama, and the importance of trial and error. But today's topic is perhaps one of my favorites and one of the first ones that we need to talk about, and that is that you are on your own journey. So it's a quote that goes around a lot on social media. We've all seen you are on your own journey before. But how it plays out on social media is to make you believe that you are unique and special, and in an attempt to stop us comparing ourselves to others. And I love that, but that is different to what I want to offer you today. You are on your own journey, to me, speaks to the need to be responsible. You are responsible for your own journey. You are responsible for the thoughts that you have, the feelings that you have, the actions that you take, and the results that you end up with. You are responsible for you. And hear me out, this is really good news. And it's good news because it puts you in power and in control. But then I want you to think about, why are some people always seemingly further along? There are always those people who seem to own the best horses, who can train a horse more quickly, who win all of the classes at all of the events. These are the types of people who just seem to be winning at life, kicking all their goals, going on lots of amazing trips, and just really living life to the fullest. And I want you to be able to create your version of that for yourself, both inside and outside of the arena. And I know some of you are thinking, but wouldn't it be an easier journey if I was born into royalty, right? Or if some other circumstance may have occurred to set you ahead of most other people. And yes, that might be true that some people had a head start on their journey. And yes, I would also love to win the lottery. But if that's not the current reality for you, then you need to let that resentment go and start focusing your attention on your journey from this point onwards. And this will be the biggest of your responsibilities, no matter your starting point. So, remember how I told you in other episodes that my version of performance coaching is a mix of different modalities? One of them is life coaching. And I honestly think that my belief of being on your own journey is best explained from a life coaching perspective. So, that's what we're going to do next. I learned this concept from one of my mentors and their company at the Life Coach School. So, the idea is that life is, let's say, 5% dictated by the things that happen to you and 95% dictated by how you deal with those things. Let's dive deeper into that. In life, we are subjected to certain circumstances. A circumstance is defined as a fact or a condition relevant to an event or action. It's just a thing that happens that you have no control over. An easy way to determine whether something is a circumstance or not is to decide whether you think it could be proven true in the court of law. So for example, if you say my horse is Chestnut, my horse is 16 hands high, that can all probably be proven in a court of law because they will be registered as a certain height and a certain colour, and you'll be able to show them photos of the horse or show them the horse in real life, and they will be Chestnut and 16 hands high. My horse raced until he was 7 years old. I can prove that for Rio. I can prove the last day that he had his last race and he came off the track. And he was 7 years old at the time because I have his birth certificate. All of that can be proven. But how about some broader life examples? You might have 2 children or 4 children. You might own a car or a bicycle. You might have a cat. Whether or not the cat is a good hunter is not a circumstance. That's just your subjective opinion. The only fact is that you have a cat. So in my life, I think of most things as circumstances. Even events that happen to me, I consider them neutral. It's just a thing that happened until I choose to respond. And that leads us to the next point of the system. Once a circumstance occurs, you will have a thought about it. And often you can't stop your initial thought because that's your instinctive one. But you can be aware enough to either choose to run with it or pick a different one. And this is really important because the thought that you have will create a feeling in your body. And we all know this on a really basic level. If we have a thought that something didn't go well or isn't working, we might feel upset or angry or fearful. But if we have a thought that something did go well, we might feel happiness or joy. And there's always this direct link. So from here, you've had a thought and then a feeling about your circumstance. That will drive your actions. So whether it's unconsciously or consciously, it will influence whether or not you've been empowered to take massive action, to do something brave, to take a small step, or even whether you've been shut down and take no action. So inaction or doing nothing is also a form of action. And lastly, whatever action you take will determine your results. And so the question really is, do the results you're getting bring you closer to your horse being rehabilitated or training to the level that you're wanting to be training at or competing at the level that you're wanting to be competing at? Are you seeing positive effects from your results? Do the results get you closer to the life that you've been dreaming of? Or are they taking you off course? Are you tracking well on your own personal journey, or do you feel like you're not reaching your goals? So there's a stage of evaluation that needs to happen again before you take more action. Or it becomes like that old story of the plane that ended up off course. So in air navigation, there's the 1 in 60 rule. And it means that for every 1 degree a plane veers off its course, it misses its target destination by 1 mile, or like 1.6 kilometers, for every 60 minutes of flying. This means that the further you travel, the further away you diverge from your destination. Are you okay with that? Or are you going to take back control of your own journey? Now that was quite a bit to take in, so let me just summarize before we move on. In life, a circumstance will occur. Your thoughts about that circumstance will dictate your feelings. That will drive the action or inaction that you take, which will determine your final result. And this is like a loop that happens over and over again, taking you along the course of your journey. Based on that, I want to suggest to you that the quality of your journey is dictated by the quality of your thoughts, feelings, and actions. Your journey is directly impacted by the quality of your thoughts, feelings, and actions. And that's why some people appear to be on a quicker, faster, better, or more successful journey. They have better quality thoughts, feelings, and actions. And They have taken back control of the 1 degree shift off course and quickly bring it back into line with their goals, their hopes, and their dreams. Let's run through some examples of that in action. An easy example for horse riders is in the competition arena. So let's say that 2 riders went around the same jump course and they both dropped 1 rail. One of them might have a thought that the jump round was a complete failure because they knocked that rail. From there, they might have a feeling of being upset or being defeated or even like they're not good enough. And you can only imagine what their actions are going to be from there. They're probably going to either stay at the same level or drop down to a lower level for the future classes because they don't feel confident enough to take on that same jump round again. Or they're going to have thoughts of lack about themselves or their horse's abilities. Compare that with the other person who went around and knocked a rail, but perhaps their thoughts were, how great was that? Out of 10 jumps, I only knocked 1 rail. All the other 9 jumps were clear. Or perhaps they think, gee, that was better than my last round where I knocked 2 rails, I'm improving. Or perhaps they watch their video back and think, I sat up really straight and I really used my body beautifully around those jumps. I'm really proud of myself. That person isn't seeing the round as a complete failure. They're having feelings of being competent and happy and comfortable and a sense of achievement. And more than likely, the action they take is to come back and jump those height of rounds again and again, and they will be ready to move up sooner than the first person. And in these 2 examples, the riders have experienced the same circumstance of knocking a pole in a jump round, but they assigned it completely different thoughts and feelings and took totally different actions afterwards. And now you can see that the one who has better set themselves up and empowered themselves is going to come back stronger and ready for the next round. And of course, I've used a horsey example here, but this concept totally applies across your life more broadly. So I'd really encourage you just to take a few moments to think about how you could apply it at work or with your family or kids or to view your other commitments. And I've actually got a personal example for you where I used this work to reframe Rio's original ligament injury that stopped our competition career. So my circumstance was that Rio had ruptured his collateral ligament and that the vet had dictated that he was no longer able to be ridden. I could prove it in a court of law. I had a piece of paper from the vet stating their diagnosis, and I had MRI images showing the rupture. At that point, this was also outside of my control. The injury had occurred. Now, my initial thought, feeling, action pathway was not very useful to me. My initial thoughts were that my competition career is totally over now. I can't afford any more horses. I won't get to ride again for years until Rio and my other old boys have passed away. And these weren't very empowering thoughts, and so my feelings also weren't very helpful. I felt confused, overwhelmed, upset, and really resentful. And for me, that put me in a state of inaction rather than action. And by inaction, I mean that looking back now, there was more I could have done for Rio in his first few months of rehabilitation. However, I could not muster the energy or the want in myself or the care to do it. I was too sad to interact fully with him or to give him any of my energy. I didn't know how to engage his brain on box rest, and to be honest, my care level wasn't there. And it was a really sad state for me then and now when I look back on it. And what's interesting is that you sometimes need to sit in a certain state of emotion or reflection before you're ready to move out of it. Sometimes what I see people who are new to this work do is immediately want to swing everything to the positive because they think this will fast track their journey and results. And I'm absolutely not suggesting we do that. Otherwise, I'm really worried that you'll end up in a state of toxic positivity. And you'll also probably find that if you think about it, you want to be able to retain both the good and the not so good thoughts. So wouldn't it be so strange if Rio had been put to sleep in my story and I had forced myself to be immediately happy about it? Or what if the vet had announced to me that he had ruptured his ligament and I was like, oh, that's great news. The vet would have thought that I'm a crazy person. It's just not very human or natural for us. We need to make sure that we still experience the whole spectrum of emotions, but I just want you to be aware so that we can start to make changes to the state once you want to change. So once I was ready, and once I was well into Rio's rehabilitation, my thought, feeling, action pathway was available for change. My thought became, this might be a cool learning opportunity for me, and I love learning. So my feelings changed to those of curiosity, interest, even a tiny bit of excitement. And consequently, I actually took action. I took that horse during his box rest time and I learned how to do core exercises at the standstill. I made him toys and things to interact with that would stretch his muscle groups in certain ways. I switched to classical dressage. I started learning about the biomechanics of a horse. I upped my groundwork. Things that I probably would have never made time for previously had Rio not sparked the need or the interest in me. And just notice that my thought didn't jump to, I love not competing, or this injury is the best thing that's happened to me. Because something like that just doesn't feel believable or true to me. But what I managed to do was slightly change my thought and get myself back on my journey, re-find some spark and some motivation, and fall in love with my horse again. How cool is that? So, you are on your own journey. You are responsible for that journey, and your journey is directly impacted by the quality of your thoughts, feelings, and actions. Something I see my clients wanting to do once they learn this is immediately change how they approach everything in life so they can attempt to accelerate their journey. And I don't want to discourage anyone. I just want you to think about a few reasons why changing all at once might not serve you. It's a little bit like the January gym curse. So we're all so keen in January. There's loads of horse riders I know, including myself, who set New Year's goals, right? And often this is a fitness goal. So this year, I joined a gym again, and I went really hard. Like I went in the early morning, I went at night after work, I joined 3 group classes a week, and do you think I stuck with it? No, because I overloaded myself. I made too many changes in too short of a time, and I wasn't able to stick with all of my new commitments and make them into habits. And this is a little bit why I don't want you to try and change all your thoughts at once. It won't stick, and you won't believe it, and it's too much of a big change. We need to treat it like forming a habit and take it just one small step at a time. And to start forming this habit, I'm going to ask you to start doing 2 things when faced with any sort of circumstance this coming week. So whether it's with your horses or in life more broadly. Number 1, I want you to practice pausing. I want you to give yourself a deep breath between the circumstance occurring and what you choose to do next. So you have control over the next step only if you can find a moment to pause, and not if you immediately react. The pause actually allows you to work out what your initial thought is, so your reactive thought. It sounds a bit funny, but I have actually become the master of holding space for myself in my corporate engineering career. So I have these meetings sometimes where people will ask me for something, my team will ask me for something, and I will actually take a moment of silence in the meeting to consider the circumstance, my thoughts, and what my course of action will be. And people are really uncomfortable with silence and really awkward about silence, so my team used to try and jump in and interrupt, but I had this confidence where I'd just say, I'm just gathering my thoughts, or I'm just choosing my words. And you know what? Now my team is used to it, and they've learned to wait in silence for me, and they do it for themselves as well. And in doing that, most of our decisions are carefully considered and well thought through prior to us picking a course of action. And this is a skill set to develop, but the first step is to allow yourself the pause and to be more aware of your initial thought, the reactive thought. And after you've identified that initial thought, I want you to ask yourself, but what if the opposite is true? What if the opposite is true about that thought? Going back to my Rio example, one of my first thoughts about his injury was, I won't get to ride for years until Rio or my other old boys have passed away. But what if the opposite was true? So just asking myself that, what if the opposite thought was true? I would come up with things like, or what if I could put my old boys back into dressage work? What if I could ride horses for other people, pick up catch rides in competition? What if my instructor would let me ride one of his horses? What if the opposite is true? And this question should be enough for your brain to really just start opening up, even in a small way, to other possibilities for feelings and actions for this circumstance. All right, this is not the dress rehearsal. This is not the warm-up ring. This is for real, your one journey. There's this really beautiful quote that I love from Confucius, who was a Chinese philosopher and politician, and it goes, "We have 2 lives, and the second begins when we realize we only have one. We have 2 lives, and the second begins when we realize we only have one. You are on your own journey. You are responsible for your own journey. And if any of this resonated with you today, I'd love to help you one-on-one to start making changes that will impact the quality of your rehabilitation and your training, and impact the quality of your life more broadly. We will balance your life inside and outside of the arena so that you can find your version of a stable relationship. Now, before you go, I promised that I was going to share with everyone a very exciting announcement. So, to celebrate the podcast launching and to thank you for all of your support so far, I am giving away 25 free introductory performance coaching sessions. This is the perfect opportunity for any equestrian who is perhaps feeling confused or stuck with their horse. In particular, you know that the rehabilitation cases are close to my heart, but it's also perfect if you feel stuck in life more broadly. If you feel lost, overwhelmed, stressed, unhappy, or like there must be more. If you're not enjoying working with your horse, or if you're not finding time to work with your horse, if you're tying your worth to your competition outcomes, or if you're just wanting to reach that next level of competition, if you are not at the core of your own training programs, if you keep people pleasing or putting others first, or for any reason at all that you think performance coaching might help, this opportunity is for you. So you are welcome to bring a specific mindset or management topic to chat about, or just come as you are and we will find our own way in the session. So I'm going to run the free intro coaching sessions in the month of July. The sign-up link will be available from next week's podcast. So once next week's podcast is released on the 27th of June. So tune in and I will tell you more then about the specifics of how to sign up. And with that exciting announcement, I just want to say thank you again for tuning in today. Please subscribe, follow along on the socials at Journey of Equine. The links are in the show notes. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you so much for listening. My goal is to help you more effectively train or rehabilitate your horse by focusing on your mindset and management, both inside and outside of the arena. If this sounds like something you'd like one-on-one help with, or if you'd like to follow along for more, come and join me on Instagram or Facebook at Journey of Equine. The links will be in the show notes. Have a great week, everyone.